Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta and British Columbia send firefighters to Los Angeles to help battle the blaze. Plus, Alberta's premier returns from a weekend with President-elect Donald Trump in Florida and says we need to prepare for tariffs. And Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre outlines how Americans would be impacted by U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. Dozens of firefighters from Alberta and British Columbia will help fight wildfires in California, and the federal government is coordinating efforts with the provinces to deploy resources, according to Emergency Preparedness Minister Harjit Sajjan. In a social media post over the weekend, Sajjan said that 60 firefighters from the two provinces will be deployed as early as Monday. Alberta announced last week it was sending up to 40 wildland firefighters with more personnel, water bombers, and contracted night vision helicopters ready to deploy. Quebec said Friday it will send 2 more firefighting aircraft to California, a day after one of the province's water bombers collided with a drone while battling the fires. The total area scorched has passed 110 square kilometers. The wildfires have now killed more than 20 people and have forced 180,000 people to evacuate their homes. Negotiations between Israel and Hamas have reached a pivotal point. Hamas has been given an agreement for the release of hostages in exchange for a ceasefire in Gaza. But will Hamas take the deal? Lisa Daftari, editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, explains.
Hamas is playing out the clock, and so is Hezbollah. So they're playing this war of attrition and saying, you know what, the more we drag this out, Israel will have to be fighting so many different fronts that they will become tired enough to give us more of our terrorists that are in Israeli prisons. And, the international community will have to play along. And at the core of this are the Israeli hostages. These are civilians. There are 7 Americans. We don't know how many of them are alive. We're estimating about half of them perhaps are alive. We don't know how many will come through on this deal or if they will keep their word. They've given a list of individuals, again, not knowing if those individuals are alive or not.
Lisa will also give us an update from the fire-ravaged Los Angeles, where she resides. Catch more of my interview with Lisa Daftari following Business News. Liberals seeking to replace Justin Trudeau as party leader have begun a race to gather signatures. Appeals are now out from leadership hopefuls to collect 300 signatures from registered Liberals, including at least 100 from 3 different provinces or territories. 7 prospective leadership candidates have now forms posted on the Liberal Party website to collect the signatures they require to enter the race. Former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, former central banker Mark Carney, and former BC Premier Christy Clark have each have forms up on the site. Candidates must declare by January 23rd and pay a $350,000 fee to enter that race. Foreign Affairs Minister Melany Joly has not ruled out an energy embargo in response to Trump's promise to impose punishing 25% tariffs on Canadian products. But Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, fresh off of a weekend visit with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, says if Ottawa uses an energy embargo to combat the incoming administration's promised tariffs, it would spark a national unity crisis. Smith says oil and gas is owned by the provinces, principally Alberta, and she says, quote, "We won't stand for that."
And you should never, ever threaten something you cannot do. And I would encourage the minister to look at a map of where Line 5 goes. Line 5 comes down through Michigan to get to Sarnia. And then that feeds the bulk of the supply needed for Ontario and connects with Line 9, which feeds the bulk of the product needed for Quebec. And so if you cut off that line, you are cutting off Ontario and Quebec. So I would encourage the ministers to either understand how our integrated pipeline system works and start looking at ways that we would be able to practically respond, because there's no point in making empty threats that cannot be executed on.
Premier Smith also says we need to prepare ourselves that tariffs are coming, but she says she's hoping to make a case with the U.S. about the energy sector.
I think if we maintain a strong partnership on energy, we make the case about how much the Americans benefit from that energy relationship. We demonstrate that we are a good trade partner, that we buy more goods and services from America than any other nation, and that we do buy more goods and services when you take energy out. I think we can make that case, but I feel like from what I have seen that it's not my decision to make on tariffs, but we do need to be preparing ourselves for the fact that they're likely to come in on January 20th.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is calling for a tougher approach to the U.S. president-elect's tariff threat on Canadian goods. Singh says he wants to see Canada halt its exports of critical minerals to the U.S., including aluminum, lithium, and potash. He made the suggestion after the Alberta Premier visited with Trump, which didn't suggest he would back down from 25% tariffs on all exports to the U.S. The U.S. is Canada's biggest customer for critical minerals, and Canadian exports of critical minerals were valued at $29 billion in 2023.
Going to meet with them, trying to wine and dine them is a failed approach. Donald Trump is not rational. You can't discuss a plan over a meal with him. He is a bully. And bullies understand one thing, that is strength. They also understand pain. So if he wants to pick a fight with Canada, we have to make sure it's clear that it's going to hurt Americans as well. There's going to be pain felt for not just Canadians, but also Americans. And so that's why I'm calling on my plan. We know that the United States needs our critical minerals. They're very important for the United States. So I'm calling on all political leaders to support turning off the taps on those critical minerals. Let's stop the flow of those critical minerals into the States. There's no quicker way to get Donald Trump to back away from tariffs than to shut off the tap on critical minerals, what the states need very clearly.
Meantime, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has outlined a slightly different plan by suggesting Canadian leaders should be talking to American workers. He explains how Americans would be impacted by U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods.
We need a prime minister who can make the case to our economic allies on the ground in America. We should go to the American workers in the Midwest and their union and business leaders and say, how many jobs are you prepared to lose by hitting Canadian energy with tariffs, energy that we sell to America at discounts that create six-figure jobs for American workers? How many of those people will go out of work? How many of those hard hats will be laid down and boots will be unfilled because Americans will lose jobs due to that self-harm?
The U.S. tariffs stand to impact our country's GDP and further aggravate Canada's skyrocketing stagflation. That is according to Stephen Johnston, director of Omnigence Asset Management. He sat down with BCN's Naveen Day to explain stagflation and highlight Canadian industries that will actually thrive amid the tariffs.
What is stagflation? Stagflation is pressure on the middle class, increasing inflation, and below-trend growth. And so there are industries, regardless of those conditions in Canada, that still experience actually good growth rates. And I'll give you an example. Think about auto maintenance, right? Because during normal times of high growth, low inflation, and a robust middle-class demand, people tend to own their cars for a shorter period of time. But conversely, during stagflation, what you tend to see is the average ownership period for a car goes out much, much longer. And of course, what happens as cars get older, they consume more auto maintenance, right? And so it's kind of counterintuitive, but during stagflation and poor economic growth, you might find the auto maintenance sector experiences growth at a multiple of GDP. Like it grows much more quickly. Another one that's more of a holistic thing to invest in is farmland. Because Canadian farmland, our biggest export market is in the United States. It's the Middle East and Asia. So first of all, you're not really subject to those tariff risks. But farmland, of course, hedges recessions really well because the demand for food is inelastic. During a recession, people don't change their food consumption behavior, right? So it hedges recessions really well, and it hedges inflation really well because it's a non-depreciating real asset.
That was Stephen Johnston, Director of Omnigen's Asset Management. Stephen, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks. It was good to be on again.
And for Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
If you wish to hear more from Stephen Johnston, head on over to our website to watch the full interview online. On Friday, hundreds of supporters gathered at the Lethbridge Courthouse to witness the fates of two men who were avid participants of the Coutts border blockade in 2022. Marco van Hugenbos and George Jansen were found guilty of mischief over $5,000 and sentenced to 120 days in prison and 90 days conditional, respectively, in a case followed by many across Canada. BCN's Landon Hickok has more in-depth details on the judge's decision.
The Lethbridge Courthouse was the site of where two men were sentenced for their roles at the Coutts border blockade in 2022. Marco van Hugenbos and George Jansen were found guilty of mischief over $5,000 for their roles, and a third man, Alex van Herk, has been given 30 days to seek new counsel after letting go of his previous defense lawyer. Now, van Hugenbos and Jansen each carried out their pre-court duties differently. Marco van Hugenbos has refused to take what's called a pre-sentencing report, which determines one's personal information, beliefs, and daily lives to determine a proper sentencing for the judge to consider. Jansen, however, has completed his PSR, and the court has gone back saying his results were positive. On Thursday, the first day of the sentencing hearing, George Jansen apologized to the court for his role at the Coutts border blockade, in a quote saying, "Our actions, well intended to voice our concerns on important issues, adversely affected the daily lives of many in Milk River and Coutts." Van Hugenbos, on the other hand, has not shown any remorse. Van Hugenbos has been sentenced 120 days by Justice Keith Yamuchi for his leadership role at the Coutts border blockade, claiming incarceration will provide a real deterrent effect. He also added that his moral culpability was a mitigating factor and compared his case to that of Anthony Olenek and Chris Carbert's sentences for mischief, where they got 6 months concurrent on top of their weapons charge of 6 years. Jansen has been handed a 90-day conditional sentence in which he can serve with 100 hours of community service. Justice Yamuchi states that he is, quote, well on the way to rehabilitation after recognizing the, quote, wrongs that he committed. No house arrest has been issued, confirmed by his lawyer later, but he is banned from visiting the towns of Coutts and Milk River.
Well, we're very pleased with the outcome in one way. We're pleased that Mr. Jansen avoided a sentence of actual imprisonment. We're pleased that he received a conditional sentence of a short duration. And we're also pleased that in this case, and it's something I haven't seen in my career at least, that Mr. Jansen did not receive any house arrest. He didn't receive a curfew. And we think that's a very good outcome for him.
The sentence is the sentence. There was a range that this justice had. A range that hasn't been set in Alberta. So he's not got any guiding precedent. And so I think what he is saying is he's joining up with his colleague, Justice Lebrens, and his colleague on yet a lower court, Justice Cranky, and saying, this is where we're doing in Alberta.
The Crown, led by prosecutor Stephen Johnston, were seeking 9-month and 6-month sentences for Van Hugenbos and Jansen respectively, arguing that their political motivations were an aggravating factor. The justice countered back, saying that their suggestions were overreaching. Jeanette?
Thanks so much, Landon. Well, Lethbridge police are reminding the public that new photo radar stations across various zones in the city are now active. 42 new stations across school, playground, and construction zones have been implemented. This comes after the province announced they are shutting down all photo radar stations on all provincial roads and leaving the decision of photo radar to the municipalities in specific zones.
Effective today, there are several new sites, photo radar sites within the city, specifically around school and playground zones. We still feel that, it's our responsibility and, to protect, those vulnerable people. Typically are younger kids in, school and playground zones where they're sometimes at higher risk.
LPS reminds drivers to please continue to drive with caution in those areas. Education support workers have begun job action in Edmonton, seeking better wages from 2 public school divisions. The Canadian Union of Public Employees says some 3,000 staff with the Edmonton Public School Board and Sturgeon Public School Division are off the job. Just north of the provincial capital, another 200 workers are taking rotation strike action and working to rule. The school support workers on strike include education assistants, cafeteria workers, and administration staff. Junior College, Lethbridge Community College, Lethbridge College, and now Lethbridge Polytechnic. Those have been the different names assigned to the post-secondary school since it opened its doors in 1957. And last year, for the first time in 67 years, the institution made the change from college to polytechnic. But what's the difference between the 2 titles? Well, our Heidi Echeverria asked this very question to the president and CEO of Lethbridge Polytechnic, Brad Donaldson, and this is what he had to say.
Colleges tend to have more broad-based programming, where ours is very job and applied research focused. Foundational learning is more of a college aspect, as is the regional stewardship, meaning that they have responsibility for the region. The programs we have here are designed to help people either start their career or move further in their career, so it's very skill and job focused. The other aspect of a polytechnic is applied research. And applied research is research that's helping to solve a problem that helps industry or commerce today. So, for example, we have a lot of work being done on irrigation, which is very important in this region. We have research on grain storage, policing, virtual reality. The combination of programming and applied research, where the applied research can also be used to help instruct students on real world, what's happening today, define what a polytechnic is. When we realized who we were, we went to the government and said, please let's move our designation from college to polytechnic, recognizing the space that we occupy in the post-secondary.
Lethbridge Polytechnic offers more than 60 career training certificates and diploma programs, applied degrees, and apprenticeships. Well, since this Monday, the Community Foundation is accepting applications for its spring grant programs. The organization's executive director, Charlene Davidson, says the goal of this initiative is to support charities doing important work and empower young people to create a project that has a positive impact on their community. Davidson explains which programs you can apply for and when the deadlines are.
We are accepting applications to our community priorities, our rural life, and our youth in actions grants programs. Youth in action closes at the end of February, but the other 2 run until mid-March. Applicants must be a CRA registered charity, or they must work with a charitable partner, and that can include the school division or the municipality, town, or village. We acknowledge that a lot of small municipalities don't have a lot of charities, but we still understand that they're doing great work and we want to be able to support them. So they just have to apply with a charitable partner. Between the 3 programs, we're probably funding 50 plus different organizations across the region. So we receive over 50 applications, usually to community priorities, sometimes more than that. Fewer applications to the Rural Life Fund, but sometimes as many as 12. And then it depends on Youth in Action, 5 to 10 applications in there. So last year we awarded over $1.6 million.
Community Foundation offers the grant program twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. And speaking of fall, it's been feeling more like fall-like temperatures out there, and it looks like the strong Chinook winds we've experienced last week are behind us, but the warm temperatures aren't. Full weather details right after the break. Welcome back. We can look forward to a lot of above zero temperatures this week, and tonight 30 kilometer per hour winds. Same thing for tomorrow, not too bad at all. High of 3 degrees though on Tuesday. Sunshine, clear skies again on Wednesday, all the way up to 7 degrees. We're going to stay above the freezing mark there on Thursday with a high of 5 degrees, and then we're going to drop below freezing, but only -8 on Friday. We could see some flurries there, and then Saturday is going to be quite chilly. Look at that, -5 -19 for the expected high with a mix of sun and cloud. And then high of -12 on a Sunday with clear skies. So that's getting back a little bit more into that range right here. Average high for this time of year, -2. Average low, -14. 13 was our record high on this day in Lethbridge, happening back in 2022. And in 1911, we saw a chilly -39. Well, Lethbridge saw. Most of us weren't even around back then. I would say none of us were around. But Lethbridge saw a chilly -39. That was the record low on this day back in Lethbridge. So sun rose this morning at 8:24. Sunset this afternoon at 4:56. So days are getting longer. We're now seeing 8 hours, 32 minutes of daylight. On the coast tomorrow, mainly cloudy skies. Victoria seeing a high of 5 degrees. Vancouver, same thing, 5 degrees. Fog dissipating by noon there. 6 for the high in Edmonton with clearing skies. Sunshine expected tomorrow in Calgary with a high of 7 degrees in both of those cities. 20 to 40 kilometer per hour winds as well. As we look to the rest of the prairies, clearing skies in Saskatoon, -5 for the high. 30% chance of light snow in Regina, -9 there. -18 in Winnipeg. They're going to see a risk of frostbite as well with that wind chill and clear skies to boot. Okay, as we look to Toronto, a mix of sun and cloud, -5 for the high. 40% chance of flurries expected in Ottawa tomorrow with a high of -4, -3 expected in Montreal with 2 centimeters of snow. As we get to Atlantic Canada, we're seeing 30% chance of flurries across the Maritimes tomorrow. So we're looking at Fredericton, Halifax, Charlottetown, 30% chance of flurries for all 3 of those cities. -4 for the high in Fredericton, 0 in Halifax, and -3 in Charlottetown. -1 in St. John's could see flurries with some freezing drizzle expected there as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast. The labor market capped 2024 with good news as the economy added more jobs than expected. Statistics Canada reports the unemployment rate decreased 0.1 percentage point to 6.7%, also beating expectations. With the unemployment rate remaining elevated and the threat of U.S. tariffs looming, economists are still calling for further cuts to the Bank of Canada's policy interest rate when it meets later this month.
Canada added 91,000 jobs in December, topping expectations from Bay Street economists, while the unemployment rate dipped to 6.7%. Statistics Canada says the education, transportation, and finance sectors saw the largest increases in employment. The gains were also concentrated in full-time jobs, which rose by 56,000. However, the report shows average hourly wages weren't as strong as they have been in recent years, rising 3.8% in December from the year before. Wage growth had been hovering around a healthy 5%. CIBC Capital Markets says even though the report is stronger than expected, the unemployment rate is still elevated and indicative of slack within the economy. Combine that with the threat of U.S. tariffs, and there's still likely a need for the Bank of Canada to cut interest rates further. Desjardins agrees, saying it thinks the BOC's benchmark rate will have to fall to around 2% from the current 3.25%.
A new report shows half of Canadians are $200 or less away from being unable to cover their monthly bills and debt payments. MNP's quarterly consumer debt report shows more than half say they don't think they'll be able to cover all of their living and family expenses over the next year without accruing more debt. And fewer Canadians expect their debt situation to improve in the coming year, with a growing number believing it will worsen. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 231 points on the day to finish at 24,536. The Dow was up 358 points to 42,297. The S&P 500 was up 9 on the day to 5836. And the Nasdaq was down 73 points to finish at 19,088. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $2.25 to $78.82 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was up 28 cents to $3.99 U.S. Gold was down $36.40 to $26.78.60 U.S. an ounce, and silver was down $1.01 to $30.31 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.52 per bushel, barley is at $6.58, canola is at $14.60, and corn is at $8.25 per bushel. Live cattle February contract was down $1.38 to $197.40. Feeder cattle were down 50 cents to $271.85. Lean Hog's February contract was up 63 cents to 83.18, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours at 69.39 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, at least 60 firefighters from Alberta and British Columbia will help fight wildfires in California, and the federal government is coordinating efforts with the provinces to deploy resources, according to Emergency Preparedness Minister Harjit Sajjan. Alberta announced last week it will also be getting water bombers and contracted night vision helicopters ready to deploy. The total area scorched has passed 110 square kilometers. The wildfires have now killed more than 20 people and have forced 180,000 people to evacuate their homes. And speaking of the LA fires, after the break, Los Angeles resident and foreign affairs correspondent Lisa Daftari gives us an update from California, along with the details of a possible ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel 1 week before Trump takes office. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of our stories and interviews. As the death toll and amount of destruction rises in Los Angeles due to wildfires, it seems some are trying to cash in on an opportunity, be it political or otherwise. Here once again to discuss this is our U.S. correspondent, Lisa Daftari of the Foreign Desk, and she's joining me from Los Angeles. Lisa, nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's horrific. It's
Yeah,
horrific.
I was just going to ask you, what is the situation there now? I understand that those hot Santa Ana winds continue to threaten the area.
Right. So we had a little bit of a break over the weekend. I don't even know if we can call it a break because the containment levels are still, the percentage is very low. I say break because the winds kind of subsided so that the firefighters actually had a chance to increase the containment by small percentages, but we'll take all the progress we can get. But now we know that the Santa Ana winds are coming back in. This it really poses a challenge for the firefighters, and then it spreads very quickly, and then we're going to see new fires. Jeanette, I'm sure everyone around the world has heard about the arsonists who are involved here, the family that's involved here, and we can talk about that going forward. But I do want to take a moment at the beginning of our segment to talk about how horrific this has been on the people of Los Angeles, regardless of how involved they have been in the actual fires. So we all know somebody or many people. I think I can count on both hands and maybe toes at this point of people I personally know who have lost their homes. And we're talking about everything they own, they have lost. People who are worried about their elderly parents, grandparents, trying to get them out, getting relocated, and then others. We have a family friend who sent his wife and kids out, into the desert to get a hotel there and get them out of harm's way. They're in an evacuation zone. They actually could go back to their homes because their evacuation was downgraded to a warning and not a full evacuation. But he told my husband he won't leave his house because he's afraid of looters and robbers. There's so many different angles to this. The worry about water being in hydrants, the worry about whether or not the fire department will show up. There is so much to this, so many things that people who pay taxes, probably in the highest brackets of, in the entire country, shouldn't have to worry about and had to worry about. So on a human level, this has affected everyone. The kids were out of school all week last week, many schools going back to school today, but then hosting events for parents as to how to address this with their young children. I have a very young son who's listening with both eyes, ears, everything he has, every time the news is on, every time there's a conversation between my husband and I about the fires. Horrific. And you think about these children were the same children, the ones who are, 5, 6, 7, 8, who remember COVID and the pandemic and the shutdown. They had to learn through Zoom. And now again, these are, such important core memories of their childhood that are so difficult to explain to a child, why this has happened, why they lost everything that they have. The death toll rising, it's 24 at this point, I believe, and I know that that will go higher. I think there's many people who, or perhaps that count won't be an exact count until we know more. I do believe it will be higher than that. So it's just been horrific.
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned your young son. How are you and your family faring with all of this? Have you been evacuated?
Thank you. We actually got 2 warnings. There was actually mistake warnings that actually went out to the entire Los Angeles County a couple of days ago, and then they told us, just be prepared, but you're not going to be evacuated yet. My family and I live on the border of 2 major fires that happened, and we absolutely were afraid that it would make its way. It's burning at such a rapid rate, and with the winds coming in and again coming in, so we're not in the clear just yet. You can absolutely smell the smoke. There's ashes everywhere. We don't have snow here where I live in Los Angeles, but it does look like a snow morning when we went out this morning, and everything was covered in ashes. Children are told to wear masks because this is not a natural, fire, like a forest fire where, this is much more dangerous and it has contaminants in the air, and the fact that it's being spread everywhere. We don't want these children to have, and many people saying, God forbid, there will be much more cancer in 10 years among the Los Angeles population because of this air quality. They're telling us not to use the water, not for drinking, not for cooking. So around the clock, we're filtering the water in a Brita system and then boiling it as well, and then putting it aside so that we're not even washing our food or cooking with water that is known to be contaminated at this point.
Oh, that is so unfortunate on top of everything else that's going on. And Lisa, you sort of allude to this earlier, but my understanding, of course, looting becoming a huge problem there in LA. And there was a burglary suspect who was disguised as a firefighter, from my understanding. So this is just crazy to hear, but I'm sure at this point, nothing surprises you anymore.
I just tweeted out, fires happen, but all of this extra pain that Angelenos are enduring is because of the politics and the political leaders here who have failed the people. And we can get into other parts of the fire response, whether the fire and police department have been defunded, and then the hydrants not having enough water, and the reservoirs not being filled. They were absolutely empty and dry. Knowing that there is a fire risk in this area, knowing that the winds are coming through, knowing that the brush has not been attended to, knowing all of that. On top of that, the crime, the people who are looking, the vultures, the disgusting, evil individuals who are looking to benefit off of all of this. There's different stories here, and I'm just going to share a few of them just to give you some of them that were caught. They had the fire app that we're all using, Watch Duty, which tells you who needs to evacuate, how far the fires are coming, the most updated kind of information.
Wow, so they're using that as an opportunity.
They're using that to see who evacuated and to go in. So imagine, and then people, I saw this online, were commenting, I can't even go to see if my house is still standing. How are these people getting through? And the answer was that they're getting through on bicycles. They're getting through by disguising themselves as, people who are part of the fire department, as you saw in that one story. Others who, as I said, won't even evacuate their homes if they're on, in a warning area, meaning you don't have to evacuate, but you're being warned because they're afraid of the looters and the burglars coming through. I mean, imagine just how many different angles they have to kind of dodge here in order to stay safe and to protect their home and property.
Mm-hmm. And Lisa, right there in your city, I understand there's a spat between the LA Fire Department's fire chief, Kristen Crowley, and LA's mayor, Karen Bass. So we've been hearing a lot of drama. Can you just quickly elaborate a little bit on this?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of anger directed towards everyone, right? Anyone who's in charge. So it's the LA Department of Water and Power and the mayor and the governor and the fire department. So finally, the fire chief started to speak out and say, you know what? It's not on me, it's on them. We've been asking them for money. We've been begging them for X, Y, and Z, and we haven't gotten it. And that is why this has happened. So she basically threw the mayor under the bus. As most people, look, one thing that I can tell you, mostly across the board, there are some fringe individuals on social media that are saying otherwise, and they're really just politically so brainwashed. that are understanding that this was absolutely the fault of leadership, the mayor, the governor, and it is not because of climate change. It is not because of, X, Y, and Z. And maybe those things lent a hand. But had we been prepared, had we had the proper leadership, had we not pulled the money from the fire department, had the fire hydrants had water, there's so many had we, that we would have gotten ahead of this fire. Fires happen every year in this part of the country and other parts too, that stay ahead of this. And the reason why this doesn't happen is because we are prepared, because we know this is going to happen, and because they have the right people in place, they have the right funding in place, and they have water to act to, and they take care of the brush so that this doesn't happen. When we know this is going to happen, we have to prepare. And there are individuals who took matters into their own hands, whether putting out their own fires with their pool water. There's so many stories. And I can't get into all of them. But, wetting their brush so that it doesn't catch fire, preparing, hosing down their roofs. We've seen so many different stories. But that shouldn't be. And bravo to those people who thought ahead and had the opportunity and had the courage and the supplies and the ability to do that. And not everyone does have those things, but that shouldn't be the case. When you're paying that kind of tax money, when you entrust your city, your government, your state, your country to take care of you, when you pay those kinds of taxes, this is not the result that any of those individuals deserved.
All right. Well, Lisa, we had heard some reports that Nancy Pelosi and California Governor Gavin Newsom were steering people to donate to wildfires, except it ended up being a Democratic website that people would land on. And it sounds a little bit opportunistic there. Do you have anything to add to that?
I saw the story on Daily Mail as well. It seems as though Newsom's team allegedly created a landing page that was part of his PAC, and PAC is it's a political action committee. It's basically his campaign committee made a website that would bring in the donations into their platform, and then he says that they would use that to allocate to different things, including misinformation about the fire. So he's more worried about defending his reputation because everyone's blaming him. He's going on podcasts. He went on one podcast, I think the day after the fire started, and everyone thought that was so in poor taste, really, to spend your time defending yourself, promoting yourself, going on a podcast, rather than really getting on the ground and seeing the victims and trying to do whatever you can, and really calling in all resources and all sorts of help from different states. From Mexico, I know they brought in some firefighters as well. But we need this done. This is, roll up your sleeves. Whatever's been done is done. This is not the time to defend your reputation. The best way to defend your reputation is to actually fix this, to put out the fires, to not allow more homes to be burned down, to not allow more casualties. And then we can talk about it. But he's more worried about his political future, his reputation, and something that a lot of Angelenos are seeing. I don't think this guy has a political future unless there's so many Democrats and leftists who are so blind to facts that are willing to close their eyes and to move forward with a choice like him. Great hair, political and presidential stature, for sure. God bless him with that. But beyond that, I think he truly failed the people of California in more ways than one. During the pandemic, we saw similar behavior where he was accused of being a hypocrite in many ways. And now we're seeing similar behavior right now where the people of California, particularly in these fires, have truly been abandoned.
Yeah, and of course we can go on and talk about the fires all day because you are right there in the heat of it, literally. But there is something else very important here. The negotiations between Israel and Hamas reaching a critical point. And Lisa, Hamas has been given a final draft agreement for the release of hostages in exchange for ceasefire in Gaza. What looks like Hamas has walked away from the ceasefire deals in the past, as we know. But do you think Hamas will agree to these terms this time?
Perhaps. Look, I just want to set the stage here just so we know what's going on. We are about how many days? A week away from inauguration. Mm-hmm. It's a Reagan-Carter moment where President Trump has come in and said the hostages have to be released or all hell will have to be paid. That kind of statement, obviously, a lot of deterrence, a forceful message as to what will happen if Hamas does not comply. The Biden administration, on the other hand, truly wanting to get this done on their watch, because this is something that they've been working towards and they really want to see this through. Hamas is playing out the clock, and so is Hezbollah. So they're playing this war of attrition and saying, you know what, the more we drag this out, Israel will have to be fighting so many different fronts that they will become tired enough to give us more of our terrorists that are in Israeli prisons. And, the international community will have to play along. And at the core of this are the Israeli hostages. These are civilians. There are 7 Americans. We don't know how many of them are alive. We're estimating about half of them perhaps are alive. We don't know how many will come through on this deal, or if they will keep their word. They've given a list of individuals, again, not knowing if those individuals are alive or not. That list includes young children, babies. They went into captivity as babies. They had their first birthdays in captivity. And now 15 months later, we're trying to see if the United States can pull this off with the help of Egypt, Qatar, and of course, Israel and Hamas at the table as well. This is imminent. This might happen at any hour. But like you said, Jeanette, you made a very good point. We've seen this scene before, right? This narrative has played out before. We're on the 1 yard line and we may not get a deal. So let's see what happens. And of course, Hamas keeping an eye on the fact that the inauguration is in a week, knowing what is at stake in terms of American politics. And they will make the decision based on, again, timing, again, wanting to take a break, because look at the Hezbollah ceasefire. That's what they did. They took a step back and they're building again. They have a new leader under Sinwar's son. They are building again. They're trying to get weapons again. Syria collapsing was a big help to Israel, because the weapons coming through from the Islamic Republic, the regime in Iran, that they would like to pass through to Hezbollah, that's been a bit shaky. But again, the Houthis continue to fire into Israel. So again, because Israel's fighting so many different fronts, the timing is, and the plan and the strategy is to take advantage of that and wear them out and to weaken Israel as much as possible. That's their goal.
Lisa, we're out of time here, but thanks so much for joining us from fire-ravaged Los Angeles. Great to have you on today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Lisa Daftari is the editor-in-chief of the Foreign Desk, and she joined us once again from Los Angeles.
Following lengthy discussions and looking over different options, Lethbridge City Council finally came up with a plan to deal with a multi-million-dollar boondoggle that's the Lethbridge and District exhibition in the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Centre. Now, to chat about this and other big stories affecting the folks here in Lethbridge from the past year is Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan, who joins us from City Hall. Blaine, welcome back to BCN.
Thank you so much for having me, Hal.
So Blaine, City Council decided to use both contingency funds along with surplus dollars from the current budget to support the LDE. That means there will be no additional property tax increase outside of the 5.1% already budgeted?
Yes, that's correct. So we used the contingencies and the main reason for using the contingencies and talking to our CFO is contingencies are there for an emergency. And we couldn't think of anything more emergent than this. And so for that reason, we decided to use that rather than increase the taxes from what was already put in place in 2022. So we heard loud and clear from the community that they just couldn't sustain an additional tax increase. And so this is the way that we did it. However, looking forward, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle now because, of course, there's no contingencies available for other emergencies that may come over the wall, and so we need to be able to put dollars back into that fund, and so hopefully that comes with cost savings and efficiencies that will be realized over the next couple of years prior to revisiting this.
Now, Blaine, some people were asking, why not just shut down the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Centre altogether, or maybe sell it off? Your thoughts?
That's a great question. And you know what? If we closed it down and mothballed it, there's still the costs. We still have the loans that are out there. It's the difference isn't as much as what people may think, because if you think about what we would lose. So, for example, we've got an incredible a facility there. Let's face it. Anytime you drive by there, it's a beautiful facility. Now, we would not have the Whoop Up Days. We may not have Egg Expo. We may not have the Home and Garden. All these different things if it was mothballed. These are community events that the community absolutely love, the citizens of Lethbridge enjoy. And so we had to think of what was best. It wasn't the easiest decision because it's something that we didn't realize that we were going to have to work with. When I was first elected as mayor, I had no idea that this would be coming over the wall. And so we've have to pivot and look at ways that we can keep taxes down and yet keep this building open.
Now let's talk about the recent Lethbridge West by-election won by the NDP's Rob Miyashiro. Interesting how the city appears to be split kind of right down the middle here, Blaine. You've got a UCP MLA representing the east side and Nathan Newdorf, who's also our utility and affordability minister. And now Miyashiro will keep the west side orange. It's just bizarre. Like, I've lived in so many cities here in Alberta that are very conservative, but in Lethbridge, that's not the case here.
Yeah, you know what? We knew it was going to be close. And I mean, anyone you talk to knew that this was going to be a close by-election. And by-elections, of course, with voter turnout being a little less than in a regular election, it was too close to call. And so I've had the opportunity of working with both Rob Miyashiro and with John Middleton Hope and over council, and both credible candidates. And it is what it is, I guess, Al, is I guess the way we'll put it, but it is divided. Our community is, with it being a West being NDP and with East being conservative. But, we move forward. We'll work with anyone. And that's the most important thing is it's working with whoever is our MLA, and that's of extreme importance.
Now, it was great to see cardiologist Dr. Saya Zilke presented with the key to the city and recognition of her tireless efforts to improve and advance cardiac care here in Southern Alberta. Blaine, are you working with the province to bring in more specialists to our city, including even more cardiologists and obstetricians?
Thank you so much for that question, Hal. It is a focus of ours, and we understand that it's the mandate of the province for doctors. However, these doctors live within our community. So we want to make sure that it's very welcoming for them and their families. And so over the past month and a half, I've had the opportunity of visiting other rural communities. So we've been up to Coaldale, to Tabor, the county, and as just in Raymond here a couple nights ago, asking for their support as we continue our advocacy work with the provincial government on bringing in specialty doctors. Doesn't mean that we've stopped with family doctors. It's just that specialty services are needed within our community as well. We have the ongoing work that we're doing with family medicine and family doctors. However, moving forward, specialty services. You brought up Dr. Zilke. Cardiologist is something that we're needing, and it was the first key to the city that I was able to present, and that was to Dr. Zilke. And I couldn't have been happier with that. She came to Lethbridge 11 years ago, and there was no cardiologist. She came down on a little visit to see what she thought of Lethbridge. And she remained here, and she has built that program up in Southern Alberta to 8 cardiologists as of next year. And so when you have the cath lab announcement, we have the cardiologists here to make that happen. That is something that's huge. I couldn't be happier. I sit I co-chair a committee with Dr. Zilke, and it's absolutely amazing the work that she does. Her story. Sometimes you need to have a listen of how she got here to Canada and what she has done to make Lethbridge, and not just that, the surrounding area, a better place to live. She's absolutely an outstanding individual.
Let's talk a bit more about the physician shortage here in our city. It is obviously a provincial issue. Many people still don't have a family doctor here, but there is support for the University of Lethbridge's Rural Medical Training School, which will hopefully, see more doctors training here soon over the next 7 to 10 years?
Absolutely. It's a super exciting thing. They'll start next year, first intakes of students next year at the rural medical facility there at the university. And stats show that if you study within an area, the chances of you staying in that area are 80 to 90%, and it depends on the stat, but they're very high, that you're going to remain within that community. So to us, that is going to do some incredible work for recruitment of doctors through that through the university and that program that they're offering.
Now, Blaine, there was a request for medical supervisors, which is the addition of 4 FTE positions for the purposes of maintaining the longevity of EMS services within the fire and EMS department here in Lethbridge. In your opinion, how will those medical supervisors really help us here?
You know, that's work. It was presented in a very high level. The intricacies and how that is going to happen moving forward is something that we're still working through all of those details. And so I think it's we've got this contract in place, and for Lethbridge Emergency Services, we want to support them in their work. And so when they bring this forward, we want to make sure that we're supporting their work, and this is part of that path to a future of a stronger Lethbridge and fire and emergency services.
Now, Blaine, as a resident of Lethbridge myself, I'll be saving a few extra bucks per month on my recycling bill, around $9. I'm appreciative of that with the recent announcement. That has something to do with council approving a recommendation on extended producer responsibility. Can you really explain how that works?
Well, you know what? As a very high level, and I always like to see that reduction, of course, on any of our utility bill, and it's something that is, I know Minister Neudorfer is working hard on trying to reduce it even more. But it's something where the costs are going to be put on to the manufacturer, for example. So it's not to the end user. So for that reason, we're going to realize some cost savings through our recycling, and that is being passed on to the community. And so it's great to be able to see. I again love to see a reduction in my utility bill. Look forward to more. But it's a great start. The flip side to that is there's going to be some businesses that will bear that cost, and it's going to be manufacturers that will bear that cost. But as on your utility bill, you're going to realize the cost savings.
Now, Council voted unanimously to support a recommendation from the Safety and Social Committee to support the Lethbridge Police Service Master Plan. Blaine, would that include the potential of maybe more boots on the ground here in our city, or more police dealing with those who are stunting and racing around in our city?
Do you know, it's a great question, Hal. And you know what? It's being a member of the Police Commission and now working with the community and the chief. This is something that is really exciting. This master plan, and the reason it is because right now we will be, as of next year, at a full staff complement within our police service, something that hasn't happened for, I'm going to say, decades, to be at the level of full complement. And so the chief is very happy with that. And I said, don't slow down, keep your work moving forward, keep hiring, retention, all of that. But we're going to have a lot more boots on the ground. And so, it's something that we've, going back a few years ago where we restored that police budget, we're able to get those officers that were needed within our community. And now I couldn't be happier that we're going to be at a full staff complement with the Lethbridge Police Service.
Yeah, years ago when you and I talked about the $1 million taken out of the police budget, so that and more was put back in?
Absolutely. So moving forward, we need to understand that, when we look at taxation, a majority of our taxation goes towards emergency services. So if it's police or fire, but I've heard loud and clear from the community, this is something they support. So taxation is something that it's part of that 5.1% tax increase, but it's something that is going to be realized with community safety. You've seen the multiple different drug busts that we've had within Lethbridge. Now, what we need to do, Hal, and you and I both know this, there needs to be a change at other levels of government, because when you have our officers in and they're arresting someone for fentanyl and distributing fentanyl throughout our community and killing those souls within Lethbridge, they'll arrest them and they're out in 10, 50 minutes later. We need to make sure that the community understands that this is not the work of the police. Our police are doing their job. This is other levels of government and judges that are allowing these folks back onto the streets. We need to fix bail reform. That has to be done, because our officers are dealing with 2-3 times in a day, are rearresting the same individuals for work that is doing an incredible disservice in our community. If it's peddling these drugs throughout our streets or doing things like that, this is something we need to have fixed. But that's at another level of government.
Yeah, bail reform, definitely a contentious issue, you bet. Blaine, let's talk about the province's decision to do away with most photo radar. Transport Minister Devin Tereshan says, you mentioned it on BCN, it'll mainly be used in schools, playgrounds, and construction zones. But what about the financial hit the city will take? Also, Police Chief Shahim Adizadeh was not impressed with Minister Drishin's announcement, saying we'll see even more speeders here in the city.
You know, the hit is, we need to understand that I've always told folks that talk to me about, you know, getting a photo radar or something. And I said, the easiest way to not get a ticket is to not speed. So it's there is this shift, and I understand the frustration that some folks have, but you know, if you obey the law, you're not going to get a speeding ticket. And I'm sorry, a lot of people are going to not be very happy with me on that, but they've pivoted now, and they're putting it into areas that school zones and stuff. And I've seen out there in social media, and other folks have reached out like, this is crazy, I can't believe. I'll tell you what, completely in support of that. We need to make sure that there's safety, especially in those zones. So pivoting from some of the other areas to school zones, I'm very happy with. I think that's important to be able to protect our youth and those schools and some of the parks and stuff like that where speeding and stuff goes on. So, you know what? It's a really touchy subject, but I think in the long run, public safety, moving to be a safer, you know, around the parks and schools is of importance.
Preparations are underway for the next municipal election coming up in 2025. I believe the big day is October the 20th of next year. Now, you were first elected to council as a councillor way back in 2013, Blaine, and became mayor in 2021. So in your opinion, over the last 11 years, how much have things really changed?
You know what? As you and I both know, Hal, and I'm sure the community knows, sometimes government moves a lot slower than me as a private business owner, as I'm still a business owner within the community. You make decisions, they're done a lot quicker than government, because when you're dealing with taxpayers' dollars, you want to make sure that you're crossing every T, dotting every I, and making sure that those dollars are going to the right reason. So things take a lot longer. As I've seen through being a councillor and into being a mayor, I'm seeing some of the things from my first and second term as a councillor being realized now as mayor. And so, you know, I look forward to you know, how things move forward. Can we speed up this process? It's a tough one, but I'll tell you what, I see how culturally diverse our community is. I see that we always have incredible events, and you know, but we always have challenges. It's working through those challenges with my colleagues is what is extremely important. And we do have a council that we're very diverse, and we're never or very rarely a 9-0 vote. However, we're very respectful, and it's something I've noticed a change since I became mayor on council is a respect that we have for one another. We may not always agree, but we respect one another and what each council member is bringing on behalf of those that they've spoke with.
Lethbridge Mayor Blaine Hagan, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal. Appreciate it.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.